Great to see everybody. Happy Friday. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, subscribe, share, get notified. We're going to watch some wild Canadian federal politics today. That's what we have on the agenda. And we have some great videos lined up. Pretty sure about that. So we're going to jump in right away. And this is what we're going to...
Days are wide awake. Visions are for crazy men. Not me, for goodness sake. But I'm seeing things. I'm seeing things. I'm seeing things, believe me, I've never seen before. My little things deceive me, like when you threw me out the door. I couldn't believe my eyes.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises. WTF. Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The world that works out. You know I am. I am Canadian. Come on! I love this country where I am. This land is where I make my stand. Your mother could get through her land.
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
You know I am Canadian. You know I am. You know I am Canadian. I am Canadian.
Hey everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
And now for this news flash. The worst blizzard in 50 years is approaching us at a great rate. The Weather Service reports that barometers are falling sharply. Oh no! Ah!
Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. This is MacDonald Carey, and these are the days of our lives.
One of the reasons I believe Trudeau is juicing the immigration numbers, first of all, I think they believe that mass immigration will turn into mass liberal votes in a few years. Yes, and there seems to be evidence for that, or at least there has been in the past. But without mass immigration, Canada would have been in a recession for some time now. What I mean by that is, on a per capita basis, Canadians are falling behind, where our incomes are falling per person. So you personally are poorer now than you were a year ago. How do you mask that if the GDP for the entire country is shrinking? Well, you bring in millions of people, and although that doesn't fix the per capita poverty, it gooses the big number because the GDP, it's gone up a couple of points. Yeah, because you're literally bringing in 5% of the population of this country. How could it not grow? So it's masking the poverty. Here's a clip where Mark Miller basically says, he admits it. He says, were it not for mass immigration, we'd have to admit we're in a recession.
The Bank of Canada has said it. The International Monetary Fund has said it. The immigration writ large has been in part responsible for preventing us from going into a recession, has been important for the net growth in the gross domestic product. Again, this has been important, and it's been important to the growth of the country. But I think it's safe to admit that we have allowed certain aspects of this to get overheated, and probably for too long.
Well, there you have it. He's admitting that it's basically putting up makeup on a very ugly face of the economy.
Yeah, it is a fake growth because it's, and I've heard economists argue this, and even economists that I like who say, oh, yes, but without immigration, we'd be in a recession. Yeah, I can guarantee you, though, that the average Canadian has felt like they've been in a recession now for about a year and a half or 2 years. Yeah. And only statistically does immigration mask the reality of the economy. The inflation is too high. The carbon tax sucks too much money out of your pocket. It's harder for your kids to find a job. Housing prices keep going up. And lots of those have nothing to do with immigration, but many of them also are exacerbated by immigration. So you bring in all of these immigrants and they suddenly start producing slightly more GDP so that it doesn't look like GDP is shrinking. It's growing very, very small. There was one quarter this year where it grew by 0.2%. I mean, that's pathetic. So it's growing small. But it's growing. And so you can say, oh, well, yes, of course, the country's growing. And that's because we're bringing in all these immigrants. Yeah. But if you look at the cost of living for the average Canadian and the opportunities that they see and the ability for them to buy a home, even to buy a 480 square foot condo tower
Thank you very much, Savage
in
Silence.
Toronto,
that's great.
is
You're amazing.
Evaporating because there's so much pressure on the housing market. And that is largely, although not entirely, but largely from immigration. And it's ridiculous for people to say immigration has kept us from being in a recession. Statistically, yes. I mean, but it's like wallpapering over a giant hole in your house and hoping that that's going to keep the cold air out in the wintertime. It's not.
You know, there are some major institutions in this country that benefit from that gross GDP. And even if we're getting poorer individually, like if you're a bank, pretty much everyone in Canada needs a bank account. And in fact, if you only have a little bit of money, you actually proportionally pay more in fees. Pretty much everyone in Canada needs a cell phone. Everyone needs a landlord. So there are some powerful lobbies, developers of condos and apartments. So there are some people that the raw numbers is golden to them. But that's very different than the average or ordinary person. I want to move on to the second clip from Mark Miller, because this is the one you were alluding to where he's sort of admitting that maybe they've gone a little too far. Listen to these astonishing numbers. He talks about the number of visa applicants from India alone is 50,000 per month. Do the math on that. That's 600,000 people a year from India alone who want to come here. Here, listen to the exact stats as he says it. Take a look.
Those measures that we have taken internally to be a little more restrictive on who gets visas, looking at countries where we are seeing people exploiting the visa system, that is to say that those that are claiming for asylum are not legitimate asylum claimants, is a challenge to the system, particularly given the volume of people that are looking to come to Canada. Again, as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right. If you compare the numbers of people that have come in, for example, in one country where we have had some of those challenges from India, we have seen those visas jump down from around 50,000 in January to less than 10,000 in August. Again, these are preliminary numbers, but it is an indicative sign that the measures that we have taken over the summer after discussions with my provincial colleagues are working. There's more work to do. And again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system, and it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border.
So he's sort of grudgingly admitting that it was out of control, but this isn't news to him. He's known this the whole time. He's been in favor of this the whole time. In fact, until about 5 minutes ago, if you criticize this, you were a racist.
Yeah. And I mean, I am amazed that he named the country that was responsible for sending the most of these asylum seeker, tourist, temporary visa, because that alone would have been verboten in the Liberal caucus until a month ago. You know, they've now started to say, well, we're going to cap the number of foreign students. We're going to cap the number of temporary foreign workers. The thing about the temporary foreign workers that drives me up the wall is that when Jason Kenney was the immigration minister and Stephen Harper was the prime minister, they made provision to allow 70,000 temporary foreign workers into Canada, largely because there was this job deficit. We had too few workers, particularly in oil and gas, and they needed bodies. So they let in 70,000. Well, the unions and the NDP and the Toronto Star, and oh my goodness, they're ruining the country, blah, 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 blah. The Liberals are letting in 700,000 or more a year, and only just now has anybody thought to criticize them over this. The hypocrisy, like if in legacy media, we wonder sometimes why we're losing credibility. And I think that's a particularly good reason why we examine one side of the issue vigorously and ignore the flaws in the other side. And one of the reasons I got into this business 30 some years ago was it was fun to be able to sit in the middle and pick apart both sides.
You know, Danielle Smith showed a lot of courage saying what she said in the political media environment, and she's already getting bashed online for it. Other premiers have shown that courage too. The premiers of Quebec has basically, I mean, about a month ago, he said, without temporary foreign workers, we would solve our housing problem immediately, which is, I think, statistically true or close to true. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Alberta, Quebec, that's 4 provinces, have spoken out boldly. And what's interesting to me is those are all provincial leaders who, again, don't have really constitutional authority. It's just through agreements that maybe they speak out. Whereas the federal Conservatives, in the form of Pierre Poilievre in particular, is still sort of timid. Previous Conservative leaders, Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, basically said, whatever the Liberals say, we say it too. Please don't call us racist. Pierre Poilievre is slowly and carefully finding his feet. He's saying, well, we'll track it to home building and employment. But he's not, which, okay, that's a baby step. But he's not saying stop it. He's not saying stop the bogus stuff, stop the, like he's not calling out things in the same way that Danielle Smith did.
And until the end of the Harper era, through Chrétien, through Martin, you know, so for however many years of liberalness that was, back through Mulroney, basically our immigration decisions were based on economic need.
Right.
If the country had an economic need for what you possessed, the skills you possessed, the entrepreneurial smarts that you had, the trade, whatever it was, we were happy to let you in because it was a win-win. We needed those skills. You wanted to come to Canada. But that connection with the economic side of things has gone out the window under the Liberals.
You know, it's true. And I'm glad Pierre Poilievre is slowly finding his courage. But I think he's so terrified of the traditional liberal media weapon against conservatives, you're racist, that I think that's the only reason holding him back.
And I think that weapon has been disarmed a bit. I think in some ways now, if the Toronto Star editorializes that you are a racist because you don't want to have 700,000 foreign students in the country, a lot of people who are reading are going to say, I agree with that. I don't think you're racist. I just think that that's smart.
You know,
for instance, on my own case, I was reluctant to go too hard on the subject of immigration until it became a mathematical issue. I am not against immigration. I'm not against immigrants from any particular area of the world. I don't have a lot of strong feelings about family reunification, for instance, as long as economically you're viable. But the math now just simply does not work. It just doesn't. And so I think we're getting to that realization among the population where, you know, we understand now that 1.5 or 2 million new people a year is unsustainable. And I think it's really, really funny because, of course, the people who are the most...
Okay, gang, we're going to cross over into question period.
Three that I can.
In the gala organized by the Love
by-election, divisive government, and try to justify what it's doing, but other than stroking its leader's ego, there's no reason to support this liberal minority government. When will the Prime Minister of the Liberal bloc let Quebecers vote for a common-sense government which will work hard for the interests of all Quebecers, which will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague talked about stroking the ego of the Conservative leader. Well, recently, the Conservative leader said that helping children go to school with a good breakfast was bureaucratic. He said that it was red tape to help children who don't have food to get a good breakfast before they go to school to learn. And you talk about feeding the ego of the Conservative leader instead of feeding children in his riding.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. But it was the leader of the NDP who was out trick-or-treating a bit early. He was tricking Canadians into thinking he was going to end his Liberal coalition, and his treat was his pension. As a result of that, more and more Canadians are facing the carbon tax, and we have 9 million Canadians who are facing food insecurity. Will the NDP Liberal government end its tricks and call a carbon tax election so it's Canadians who have the treat?
Hear, hear. I'm hearing some other voices aside from the one who has the floor. I would just ask members to please hold off until it's time for their question or comment. The honourable member, l'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
You know, it's pretty rich for the Conservatives to be talking about pensions as they're actively committed to cancelling Canadians' pensions and their pensions.
At least there's no Greg Fergus today. That was a disaster. I found that so frustrating yesterday to watch and like.
And the leader of the Conservatives' pensions worth more than $2 million. But as always, Madam Speaker, the three-word slogans coming from the Conservatives don't make sense. They're not even true. Inflation is down. Interest rates are down. Gas prices are way down. And according to the Canadian Climate Institute, thanks to our environmental policies, emissions are down too. Despite this good news, Madam Speaker, the Conservatives don't want to cheer for the Canadian economy or Canadians. They want bad news to tread on us.
Again, I'm hearing lots of voices, and I have my speaker on, and I'm having a hard time hearing the answer. So I would ask members to please listen carefully before they speak. The honourable member for Foothills.
Here's the real news, Madam Speaker. The number of Canadians facing food insecurity is up 111%. That is 25% of Canadian families who can't afford to put food on the table. Let that sink in. How is that even possible? But that is the stark reality Canadians are facing as a result of the Liberal NDP costly carbon tax, driving up costs on farmers, on truckers, and on food production. The Liberal NDP government has already said they don't work for the people. They work for the Prime Minister. Will this NDP Liberal government put Canadians first and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, time and time again in this House, the Conservatives cite food bank lineups and food insecurity to try to signal that they care about Canadians, while they every day stand up in this House and cheer on bad news and really root for the failure of our economy in Canada. Inflation is down to the Bank of Canada's target rate of 2%. That is good news for all Canadians. That affects food prices in this country. Our government has put forward a grocery rebate, GST rebate, immediate support, and a national school food program. The Conservatives voted against feeding children.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Today, I'm going to talk about seniors' precarious financial situation. Seniors are listening to us, and they expect us to put aside petty politics. It's completely unjustifiable that people between 65 and 74 are receiving 10% less old age security than people older, at a time when they're facing the same cost of living. There's no reason to create a two-tier system like this. This is age-based discrimination. Will the government put an end to this, or will it have to defend its actions at the ballot box? The Honourable Minister. Well, first of all, Madam Speaker, is that yes, we did increase assistance for seniors 75 and older. As my colleague knows,
I don't mean to interrupt this gross Minister Duclos, but I would like to say hello to everybody in the room. We're going to try to do it. Bare Bones, what's up? Charlene Hopper, always a pleasure. Cryptomeria, how you doing, sister? Donna Logan, great to see you. Gus Pappas, how are you today? Jim Harrington, Bellington, what's up? Kenzie Kraken, what's up, sister? Kirk, my man, beam me up, Scotty. Life used to be good. Good to see you. LJ, always a pleasure. Luke, good to see you. Welcome back. Matt Jodry, what's going on? Nene, Nick Godro, Rita DeSandro, Savage Silence, Sherry Turcott, Sylvain Robert, and True Blue 104. You guys are the best. Back to the Bloc Quebecois.
Government support all seniors from 65 years of age, or will they pay the price at the ballot box? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague talked about platitudes. It's not a platitude that 8,022 seniors in her riding as of July 22nd will now be able to get affordable, accessible dental care.
I missed you, Janet Nunn. Good to see you, Janet Nunn.
Many of them have been waiting for this for years.
Stephen Jones, what's up?
Because dental care costs a lot.
Did I miss some
Cleanings, crowns, and so on. It's very expensive. And it's painful. While they're not getting care, it's painful. But now there's 8,000 people in her riding, but some are not members yet.
Indigenous peoples represent 20% of unhoused people in Canada. The CEO of Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, only 0.2% of all funding to end homelessness is going to Indigenous peoples. This means thousands will be living out in this cold this winter because of the Liberals. Conservatives voted against any funding for Indigenous housing. When will the Liberals end its genocidal policies, stop breaking their promises, and ensure Indigenous peoples have places to call their home?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Madam Speaker, we are taking action to address the tremendous lack of safe, affordable housing and housing supports for Indigenous peoples in urban, rural and northern communities. Conservatives are pulling from the same old Ottawa knows best approach. Since 2016, we've taken a different approach, working closely with partners to determine the scope and scale of housing needs on reserve. In our efforts to help close the gap, we've increased our funding for on-reserve housing by over 1,100%. We're supporting the construction, renovation, and retrofit of over 36,000 homes in First Nation communities and are co-developing a 10-year housing and infrastructure strategy. We won't stop, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Really disappointing, Madam Speaker, to see the Liberals stand up when they know they've done less than 2%, 0.2% spending on Indigenous housing need. Today, rental vacancy rates in St. John's bottomed out at 1.5%. That means that even when doing everything right, people still can't find an affordable place to live. This housing disaster is happening because Liberals and Conservatives gave 1 million affordable rental homes to corporate landlords. And now the people of St. John's and everywhere in Canada are paying the price. Why are the Liberals, just like the Conservatives, not protecting Canadians from greedy corporate landlords?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communication and Communities.
It is very true, Madam Speaker, that rent is too expensive in this country, but what's incumbent on
all federal parties, including the NDP, is to put forward a plan. The Conservatives don't have a plan, but neither does the NDP. What's our plan to help on rent? We've waived GST from the construction of apartments for lower income and middle class families and individuals. We put forward an acquisition fund to help not-for-profits purchase housing facilities to keep rent affordable. And we've invested in co-op housing, the single largest investment in the past 30 years. Where's the NDP on these issues?
The honourable member Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. The coalition just got bigger after the NDP leader's fake stunt of ripping up his agreement. Now, this NDP Liberal government has new partners in the bloc. These coalition partners support being part of a government that hiked taxes, ballooned food costs, doubled housing costs, and unleashed crime and chaos in our once safe streets. When will Canadians have a carbon tax election so they can decide between this costly coalition government and common sense Conservatives?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While the member opposite brought up crime and chaos in the streets, let's talk about what the member of St. Albert Edmonton was doing in the Ottawa streets just this past week. He was having cocktails and flirting with fascists who actually interrupted a Terry Fox memorial. Madam Speaker, Conservatives are spending more time with those who are flying Russian flags on Parliament Hill than concerned about Canadian safety.
Order. Order. I want to remind members, if they don't have the floor, they shouldn't be speaking, and there was quite a few of them doing that. So just listen to the answer, whether you like it or not. The order. Order. The honour for Kelowna Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, in Kelowna recently, someone broke into a home in Kelowna and stabbed a woman. This was a violent, random crime. And so for the member to talk about discounting crime and chaos in our communities, shame on her. Canadians can't afford this costly coalition that taxes your food, punishes your work, takes your money, doubles your housing costs, and unleashes crime and chaos in our communities. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. When will we have a carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, once again we see the Conservatives purporting to support feminism and to be against violence against women, yet what we know is the vast majority that women are subjected to gun violence, yet what do Conservatives do? They're silent. They take on the talking point of the gun lobby over Canadian women who are saying that we need to keep our communities safe and get restricted weapons that are meant for the battlefield off our streets. Why aren't Conservatives standing up for Canadian women?
Again, I want to remind members to please be respectful. They had the opportunity to ask a question. They should take the opportunity to listen to the answer.
Tell her to be respectful.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert Edmonton is out of order, and I would ask him to hold himself back from all of these outbursts. The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Last week, the NDP leader, in a performance, ripped up the agreement with the Liberals, saying, "We will never, ever get back together." But there we are, the first week of Parliament, the first opportunity. The NDP are propping up the Liberal government. No one can keep up with this. They will or they won't SEGA. So, simple question for the parties of the other side. Will they or won't they?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you.
What's
Madam
up,
Speaker.
Calabaroo? How are you today?
As the question wasn't directed towards us, I'll just take advantage of this day about military families to underscore the sacrifice
Marianne
of
Wales,
military
always a
families
pleasure.
in
Good
Canada
to see you.
who help to support our safety here in Canada and elsewhere in the world. I know that there are currently a number of members of our forces who are in Latvia for Operation Reassurance. I'd like to thank all members of the forces and their families for what they do.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, time's up. According to StatsCan, after 9 years of this Liberal government, 111% more Canadians are dealing with food insecurity. That's 4 million more Canadians who will have trouble feeding themselves tonight. What will it take for this cowardly coalition of the NDP and Bloc to finally stand up with Conservatives and defeat this tired, corrupt Liberal government?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Cynical politicians like the Conservatives have tied their political fortunes to the failure of the Canadian economy. Good economic news for Canadians is actually bad news for the Conservatives. They've told us time and again that there would be perpetual inflation unless we adopted their austerity agenda. Inflation is actually at a historic low, Madam Speaker. It's at 2%, which is exactly the target rate set by the Bank of Canada.
Here.
Are they really being honest when they speak in this House, or are they just gaslighting Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Madam Speaker, the Bloc Québécois has told the Liberals that they will keep them in power, which means they've sacrificed their ability to negotiate, specifically about the Environment Minister's decree. The Premier of Quebec is asking the Parti Québécois to make their big brother in Ottawa see sense. The leader of the Bloc Québécois should support our motion to fire this incompetent, big spending and centralizing government. And when will the Liberals do something to help communities in the Saguenay region and give up on their order against forestry communities? The Honourable Minister. Well, my colleague had a question for the Leader of the Bloc. It's up to the Leader of the Bloc to answer, but I will just offer some useful information. I will just remind the member that thousands of seniors in her riding received their membership card for the new dental care program. But unfortunately, the leader of her party said on Radio-Canada recently that the dental care system doesn't even exist and there's no point asking for a membership card. Does she believe in her leader, or does she believe in the 16,000 seniors who received their membership card? The Honourable Member. The Bloc Québécois seems to be a terrible negotiator and unable to defend Quebec's interests. It announced openly to the Liberals, don't worry guys, we're not going to cause an election. That doesn't leave them any leeway for negotiation. And it wasn't even able to convince this government to help Saguenay communities that are threatened by this Environment Minister's heartless decree. Will this centralizing spendthrift government support our demand to give up on this destructive environmental order? Once again, Madam Speaker, this is a question for the Leader of the Bloc. I don't know why they're looking at us. But she didn't answer my question. Will she correct the insulting thing that the Conservative leader said yesterday once again? He spent the whole day insulting Quebecers. Will she call him to order and ask him to recognize that the dental care program, which is helping thousands of seniors in her riding, will she ask him to recognize that this dental care program exists?
James Nunavik-EU.
Le fédéral coupe les vivres.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Liberal government is cutting funding to seniors' organizations. It's very upsetting that Ottawa is depriving organization of funding for the Aging Well at Home program because it's refusing to sign an agreement with Quebec. The Liberals know that they are interfering in Quebec jurisdiction and seniors are paying the price.
Hello, Cindy. Hello,
They know
Brenda.
very well that
How are
Quebec
you
has
guys
its own
doing?
very
Welcome
successful
aboard.
in-home healthcare program.
Steve
When will
Floyd,
they
what's
stop
up, man? How are you?
this practice of making seniors pay for their petty
Tyrone,
politics?
it is
The
good to see
Honourable
you back.
Minister. Madam Speaker, we know that it's very important to help
Francine
seniors,
Fortier,
especially after the
what's up?
pandemic. And that's why the good news is that out of 22 projects for Quebec, 12 have already been approved. That's good news. There will be 10 others to approve. And we need to ensure that this money goes to community organizations in my colleague's riding, and that could be done instantly. That could be done instantly if everyone would just agree. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Bay James Nunavik-EU. The Liberals know very well that they do not have the right to sidestep the government of Quebec. They are trying to leverage community organizations to interfere with Quebec's business. And they're blaming Quebec, saying that Quebec is the bad guy, whereas Ottawa is actually the one who's blocking the money. This would all be over in 5 minutes if the Liberals actually cared about seniors' interests. But instead, this deadlock has been going on for months. When will the Liberals finally stop taking seniors hostage? The Honourable Minister. Well, I'm a bit surprised, because we just heard that helping seniors shouldn't be up to the federal government, and that MPs in this House should not help seniors in their own ridings. I find that very surprising. We all in this House are responsible for helping seniors. And in this case, they simply need to call members of the National Assembly and tell them that the government should simply accept M30 and go ahead to fund these organizations.
Madam Speaker, 2 years ago, the NDP leader sold out workers when he signed on to the costly coalition that raised taxes,
What's up,
increased
Joey?
food
What's up,
costs,
Harry?
and doubled the cost of housing. Then, 2 weeks ago, he tore up the agreement, he said. But this was just a cheap political stunt to avoid losing a safe NDP seat in a Winnipeg by-election. After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time's up. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election now? Yes or no?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. While the Conservative Party is so focused on slogans and bumper stickers, we in government will continue to be focused on the real concerns that Canadians have, dealing with issues like inflation, which is, by the way, at 2% today, supporting our seniors, supporting our children, looking in terms of how we can build a stronger and healthier middle class, building a stronger and healthier Canadian economy. That's what we're focused on, while Conservatives are focused on idiotic ideas.
The Honourable Member for
Mother of the
Calgary
drummer,
Rocky
good to
Ridge.
see you. What's up?
Conservatives are focused on axing the tax. The Prime Minister plans to quadruple the carbon tax, which has already made life unaffordable for working Canadians, and the NDP leader agrees with him. He's already voted for the carbon tax 24 times, no matter how much it hurts working people. The NDP leader will say or do anything to save himself, proving that he is not worth the cost. Canadians are fed up. They're ready for a common-sense Conservative government to axe the tax. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the Conservatives will never let the truth or good news get in the way of their shameless exploitation of the challenges that Canadians are facing these days. And their three-word slogans are not solutions, they are not policies, and they're childish, but they're also fake news. Inflation is down, interest rates are down, gas prices are down, and thanks to our environmental policies, emissions are down too. It's disappointing that the Conservative spirits are down with all this good news. It's clear that all they really want is negative news to blame us for. Thank you, Madam.
The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Madam Speaker, just a few short weeks ago, the NDP leader, in a desperate attempt to stave off an imminent Conservative victory in a once safe seat, told Canadians that he would no longer support this Liberal government. Fast forward 2 weeks and the great magician has performed a reappearing act, resurrecting his coalition with the Liberals. Canadians did not give this NDP Liberal government a mandate. Taxes are up, food's up, crime's up, and now time's up. When will this Liberal government finally give Canadians a choice and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, what we see is the Conservative Party, that far-right MAGNA Party, which is being led by a leader that does nothing but spread negative news. He goes around every region of the country saying that Canada is broken. Well, have I got news for him, Madam Speaker? Canada is the best country in the world to live and call home. We will continue to be focused on making the conditions better for all Canadians. That is something that we're prepared to do, whether it's a budgetary measure or a legislative measure, because we care about Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
What is he going on about?
Well, Madam Speaker, this government may claim that they care about Canadians, but Canadians across this country have told us loud and clear they don't care for this Liberal government. If they can't even win vacant seats in downtown Toronto and downtown Montreal. How much longer can these Liberals hold on? Canadians didn't give them a mandate for exploding food prices. They didn't give them a mandate for doubling housing prices. And they didn't give them a mandate to triple crime rates across this country. Canadians have been clear. They don't want a tripling of the carbon tax. They don't want 61 cents a litre for the carbon tax. When will this NDP Liberal government finally give Canadians a choice and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, Conservative rhetoric is up, Conservative nonsense is up, rhyming is certainly up, and Canadians are getting fed up. My intention, Madam Speaker, is to do what I've always done, keep my head down, work on the issues with my colleagues. They can keep working on bumper stick and slogans all day long.
Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Madam Speaker, under the Liberals, Feed Ontario has reported an 8-year high in food bank usage. The report cited the lack of a social safety net as a cause for this crisis. Now, I know the sore losing leader of the Conservative Party is only concerned with protecting his rich friends and that people will get poorer under his watch. So my question is for the Liberals. Will they listen to award-winning economists and support my bill, C-223, to put in place a framework for a guaranteed livable basic income so people can afford to eat?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
It's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that through some crude political calculus, the NDP has compromised a progressive agenda for Canadians and abandoned the great work that we were doing together on programs like dental care, pharmacare, a national school food program, all of which strengthen the social safety net in this country. We've offered on grocery prices and through elevated inflation a grocery rebate, 50% reduction in childcare fees, a grocery code of conduct. We've got comprehensive reforms to the Competition Act in this country. These are both short-term and long-term measures that are making a difference for Canadians every single day.
The Honourable for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, this summer barges along the Mackenzie River were cancelled due to low water levels after a prolonged drought, stranding residents without shipments of supplies. Northerners have made it very clear that they need an all-weather road along the Mackenzie to keep a lifeline to their communities. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives are ignoring these calls. So will the Liberals fund the construction of a road connecting communities in the Sahtu, or will they keep denying Northerners the infrastructure that they need?
Excellent question.
The Honourable Minister of Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for that very important question. We know that climate change is real. We know that the climate is warming 4 times the rate in the north. The climate is warming 4 times the rate of the rest of Canada, and that's something we need to address. We are doing it with our northern partners, including the Premier of Northwest Territories, who I met about 3 weeks ago, and we had great discussions on the Mackenzie Highway, and that's going to come up in the future.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton East.
Madam Speaker, this week across Canada we're celebrating National Legion Week. Legions significantly contribute to the well-being of veterans and ensure that Canadians remember the sacrifices they've made. In my riding, Stony Creek Legion Battlefield Branch 622, led by Stuart Jones, is a powerhouse of support for veterans. His leadership is truly inspiring, and we are deeply grateful. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans Affairs share with this House how our government has been there to support Legions and their incredible community contributions?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are over 1,350 Legion branches across Canada, including Wally Legion Branch 229 in my hometown of Surrey. Their members represent one of the largest volunteer bases in this country. It's why we set up Veteran Organization Emergency Support Fund during the pandemic so that they could safely keep their doors open. And it's why we've been proud to support Legions to improve infrastructure, make accessibility upgrades, and deliver many new horizons for seniors projects. I want to thank the member for highlighting the Legion's impact in the community, and I hope members will join us in thanking Legions for all they do to build a stronger Canada.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time's up.
2 years ago, the NDP leaders sold out workers and signed a costly coalition deal with the Liberal Prime Minister. That deal hiked taxes, ballooned food costs, doubled housing prices, unleashed crime and chaos on our once safe streets. Will the Prime Minister finally call a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose between the costly coalition or common sense Conservatives who will axe the carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'm actually quite concerned about where the Conservatives are getting many of their ideas these days. You see, because records show that the Conservative leader got his advice on how to help Canadians struggling with the cost of living from a Loblaws lobbyist. He gets his advice on Ukraine from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, Madam Speaker. He's courted support from misogynists and far-right hate groups. And these are the advisors that I think Canadians should be afraid of.
The honourable member Calgary Shepherd.
It's just too bad that this Prime Minister, the only buddy he cares about is the one he has in the NDP and their leader, who voted 24 times to hike the carbon tax. And over the summer, while door knocking, what I heard clearly from Calgary to British Columbia to Ontario, everywhere I went, I heard the same thing. Canadians are fed up with the skyrocketing costs of food, gas, and housing. From food to housing, they're sick of paying for the NDP Liberal coalition's failures, and Canadians deserve better. Why won't the Prime Minister and his NDP backers let Canadians have their say in a carbon tax election right now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, it was interesting this summer to see our athletes compete at the Olympics. When our gymnasts at the Olympics stick a landing, all of us cheer. I think we should do the same this week, certainly with the Bank of Canada and the Government of Canada sticking the economic landing of inflation coming down to 2%, which is the Bank of Canada's target rate. That's what happened this week, Madam Speaker. Only the Conservative Party in this House did not cheer for Canada's economy. Just like this summer when they couldn't bear it when our athletes did well at the Olympics, winning gold medals. They did not cheer. They're never cheering for Canada's success.
Member for Bow River.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time is up. The NDP leader's publicity stunt got some airtime, but when it comes to voting against the government that he said was finished, he caves. Carbon tax already cost trucking industry $2 billion. Now, with this quadrupling, it will be expensive for our trucking industry to survive. Will they listen to Canadians and call a carbon tax election now? So common sense Conservatives can axe the tax now. Thank you.
Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. And once again, these Conservatives will never let the truth get in the way of their exploitation of the real challenges that Canadians are facing. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that in Canada, inflation is down to the target rate of 2%. Interest rates are down, gas prices are down, and emissions are down, Madam Speaker. But we've heard it from the Conservatives over and over again. They'll never cheer for the Canadian economy. But this summer, when we were all cheering on our Canadian athletes, I barely heard a squeak from the Conservative side. And in fact, the Conservative leader never even tweeted once about the Paralympics. That's really disgusting, Madam Speaker. We should all be on the side of Canada.
Order. The honour for Regina, Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Despite the NDP leader's video claiming to tear up his support for the Liberals, the two parties continue to make life less affordable for Canadians. They have promised to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents per litre. Madam Speaker, why doesn't the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide if they want to continue to pay his carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board.
Madam Speaker, inflation is down, interest rates are down, car theft is down, gas prices are down, emissions are down, and all Conservatives can do is frown. I just don't understand why we don't have a Team Canada approach. The Canadian economy is getting better. Things are getting better. Why don't Conservatives try to work with us and make things better? That's the kind of House of Commons I want to be in.
House Father,
The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Négette, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Once again, we need to bring up Amira El-Gawabi. The Prime Minister's advisor on Islamophobia has given herself a rather broad mandate. She wants to dictate to universities which professors they should hire on the basis of religious criteria. That goes against the principle of secularism. She even wants to dictate the training that universities should offer them. This is clearly not desirable, nor is it any of her business. On Tuesday, the National Assembly of Quebec once again unanimously called for her to resign. But once again, she won't resign. When will the Prime Minister finally show her the door?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As my colleague may know, I worked in universities for a long time, and I understand how incredible Quebec's universities are. They're renowned in Canada and around the world. We fully trust Quebec's universities to make the right decisions for them, but it's also important to consider diversity in such a large and diverse country as Canada. It's a blessing that we have this diversity. The Honourable Member. Ms. El-Gawabi's mandate is supposed to be building bridges, but all she's doing is digging gulfs and divides. She embodies a risk associated with excessive multiculturalism promoted by Canadian political parties. What risk is that? Well, when we care only about the needs of one interest group and when we're blind to the needs of others, that is not good for social cohesion. Ms. El-Gawabi is doing more than demonstrating that she's not the right person for the job. She is, in fact, demonstrating that the position itself should be scrapped. Will the government finally put an end to this failed experiment? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's very easy to engage in divisive politics. It's easy to divide Canadians and Quebecers. Anyone can do that. What is more difficult to do, and also more important to do, is to unite people. We all in this room have the responsibility and the ability to unite people, whether we're Quebecers, from any walk of life, of any religion. We are all equal Quebecers in the eyes of the law, and we all have the right to live with dignity and to live well.
Madam Speaker, after 9 long years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. 2 weeks ago, the NDP leader made a big spectacle of tearing up the costly coalition agreement with the Liberals. But now he says the NDP will vote to keep them in power. What's the truth? It's all a stunt to trick voters. British Columbians are struggling and want to change election. Will the Liberals axe a tax or call a carbon tax election today?
Parliamentary Secretary.
You know what else British Columbians care about, Madam Speaker? Their workers care about unions. Yesterday, in front of the parliamentary committee that's responsible for labour issues, we heard what the Conservative position on unions actually is. They would allow for unions to be starved of membership dues that are vital for their functioning. That means unions wouldn't, among other things, be able to collectively bargain on behalf of their members. On the one hand, they talk about workers. You scratch the surface, Madam Speaker, you find a party that's the same old thing. They do not care about Canadian workers.
The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Even after their breakup, the leader of the NDP is keeping this Prime Minister in power. What a surprise. That means quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, driving more Canadians to food banks and grinding our economy to a halt and killing hundreds of thousands of jobs. That means he's punishing hardworking Canadians just to keep his pension. When will the Prime Minister do the right thing and call for a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Again, Madam Speaker, pretty rich for the Conservatives to stand up in this House when they've introduced legislation when they were in government to raise the retirement age to 67 and gut Canadians' pensions. Madam Speaker, we're the party that reformed CPP and brought forward more senior supports. We are working to ensure that Canadians' pensions are strong, Madam Speaker. But I have to mention, that member from British Columbia stands in this House all the time to rail against carbon pricing. He was part of the Liberal government in British Columbia that brought forward Canada's first ever carbon tax, a successful measure that has lowered their emissions in British Columbia for over a decade. The hypocrisy, Madam Speaker.
L'honorable député de Beauce.
The honourable member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, the Bloc Liberal coalition is costing Quebecers and Canadians more and more. The Liberal Bloc voted for $500 billion worth of inflationary centralizing spending. Frankly, what good is the Liberal bloc? They're spending more than ever, they're causing more scandals than ever before, and hiring thousands more public servants, ballooning big bureaucracy with Quebecers' money. What does the bloc support? Well, they support the Prime Minister and his government. Only a Conservative government can clean up this mess. What's the Prime Minister waiting for to call an election now? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, my colleague surely knows that Quebecers have already experienced Conservative austerity, and they didn't want more of it. Quebecers know that when we invest in them, when we help the most vulnerable, when we help seniors, that's how we help Quebecers get through tough times, like the tough times we experienced during the pandemic. My colleague knows full well that we were able to invest in Canadians, all while getting inflation back down. It's back into the normal target range now. So we don't want Conservative austerity, and neither do Quebecers. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Madam Speaker, we know that families across the country are struggling with the cost of living, including in my riding of Châteauguay-Lacolle, which will soon be called Châteauguay-les-Jardins de Napierville. The Canada Child Benefit is a source of support for families in my community. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development please inform the House of the impact that this important benefit has had on Canadian families? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. For over 4 million Canadian families, the Canada Child Benefit has made a real difference. They can receive up to $5,000 per child under 5 and $7,000 for children over that age up to 17. The benefit was increased in July of this year. It will now be about $350 more per year as compared to last year. And the benefits have already been sent out. The Conservatives, though, they would cut this program and they would leave families to struggle.
And Rideau Lakes.
Well, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up, with jaw-dropping news about carbon tax Carney. His investment firm owns the second largest mortgage insurer in Canada, and these Liberals changed the rules to allow for larger and longer mortgages, meaning higher interest payments and more money in carbon tax Carney's pocket. His company's stock shoots to 6-month highs, and he tells the Prime Minister to raise the carbon tax on Canadians. Is that supposed to be a good deal for Canada?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Unlike the Conservatives, we do see the value in consulting experts from across Canada. But let's talk about where the Conservatives have been getting their advice lately. You see, the leader of the Conservative Party gets his advice on how to help Canadians with the rising cost of food from a Loblaws lobbyist. They also get their advice from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. Madam Speaker, these Conservatives get their advice from misogynists and far-right hate groups, and I think Canadians should be very concerned.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's a new conflict of interest every single day with carbon tax Carney. His buddy, the CEO of Telesat, got $2.14 billion in a check from this government for what other companies say they could do for half the cost. His investment firm is in discussions with the Liberal government for $10 billion taxpayer dollars. And like I just said, his investment firm is also going to be cashing in with 6-month stock price highs after changes to the mortgage rules. Is it any wonder that this Liberal Prime Minister, twice found guilty of breaking ethics laws himself, is trying to shield carbon tax Carney from Canada's conflict of interest regime?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, you know, sadly, what else is up? Character assassination. It's unacceptable, Madam Speaker, to come into this chamber and time after time go after individuals' character. It undermines the integrity of this institution, and Canadians are fed up. I would have thought this member of all people would have learned that lesson some time ago, but apparently I was wrong. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Carbon tax Carney's appointment as a de facto finance minister is more of the same boondoggle this government is famous for. Almost immediately, a $10 billion contribution to one of the companies that he serves on is announced. shoveling an extra $200 million per year to Brookfield, and carbon tax Carney shoving more money in his own pockets. Why did the Prime Minister exempt his de facto finance minister from conflict of interest rules?
The Honourable Secretary Parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The Conservatives stop betting against the success of Canadians. Canada's growth is actually projected to beat all of our peers, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and I could go on. But the Conservatives have hitched their political and electoral fortunes on the failure of the Canadian economy. The truth is that we are making the economic pie larger and larger so that every Canadian could get a larger slice, Madam Speaker. When will the Conservatives stop betting against the success of Canadians?
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Centre.
Madam Speaker, this summer, millions of Canadians tuned into the CBC and Radio Canada to cheer on Team Canada at the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. Canadian athletes set new records and made us all so proud. Scarborough is home to many athletes who train at the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre, but it is also an important community hub for activities and events. We are proud of our local heroes like Scarborough's Josh Leondo, who became the first Black Canadian swimmer to win an Olympic medal. Can the Parliamentary Secretary for Sports and Physical Activity let this House know how we are supporting athletes so they can keep representing Canada with pride and excellence?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canadians are proud to celebrate the exceptional performances of Team Canada athletes this summer as they won a record number of medals and inspired the next generation of Olympic athletes. And Madam Speaker, through Budget 24, our Liberal government boosted the Athlete Assistance Program that supports Canadian athletes. These carding checks directly support over 1,800 athletes across more than 94 sports. But we're also investing more broadly in participation, Madam Speaker, not just for future sports stars, but also to support the physical and mental health, the strength of our communities through the Power Sport Physical Activity and Recreation. Our community Sport for All has brought sport to over 1 million Canadians so they could try new sports and activities, because when Canadians are moving, our whole country wins.
The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Communities in my riding have been waiting for the plan for open net fish farms. It was supposed to be released in June. The Liberals instead announced that they'd be announcing a plan later. The Liberals have spent years delaying on real job strategy for all of those who will be impacted. Coastal communities must not be left behind. Will the Liberals stop the delay and ensure the plan delivers necessary funds to support impacted First Nations and coastal communities?
Hear, hear. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government is committed to protecting wild Pacific salmon and will implement a ban on open net pen salmon aquaculture in British Columbia by 2029. Fisheries and Oceans Canada is working to ensure that the draft transition plan for salmon aquaculture is measured and indeed responsible. It is important to take the time necessary, Madam Speaker, to get the draft transition plan right, given its importance to British Columbians. Work on the draft transition plan is underway and will be released in the coming weeks.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Madam Speaker, Khaled Bearcat is a member of Samadoun and a leader of designated terrorist group Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. Bearcat was banned from entering the EU, and Germany banned Samadoun outright. Yet in Canada, Bearcat is free to spew hatred. At one rally, he said Canada should condemn the killing of terrorist leaders and that he hopes for Israel's destruction. Will the Liberal government take action to have Bearcat arrested for hate propaganda and list Samadoun as a terrorist organization, or will it continue to be a doormat?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, in no way, shape or form is hate speech or the support of terrorism allowed in our country. We are deeply concerned about these statements. We are looking into this situation, into this matter. We take the member opposite's question seriously and are here to promote a Canada that is united together, that confronts discrimination and is in harmony. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And that brings us to the end of question period.
All right, guys, so that's going to end that, but we've got another video to watch here. This one is so good. Like, have you ever seen Edie Fry in action? She's like as old as Yoda, and she's chairing a committee. She's incapable and also a spoiled old lady. Anyhow, it's really entertaining to watch this. So I'm just going to flip this over. And here we go. We'll get this going.
Just a minute.
It's hysterical, man. Just watch this lady. Like, Giddee
All right,
is...
j'ouvre maintenant la séance.
So I declare the meeting open. Welcome to meeting number 100 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people.
In a hybrid format, pursuant to standing orders, and members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. While public health authorities have suggested that you do not any longer require mask wearing indoors or the precinct, I would like to say that COVID-19 and the flu is rampant out there, so if you would wear a mask, that would be great for yourself and others. I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone in the room that participants are not allowed to take screenshots, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons, so you can go and look at it there. Now, this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, and as such, feedback can occur, and it's harmful to the ears of the interpreters quite often. So what I'd ask you to do is, if you have any of your devices or anything, make sure that your mics are off when you're not speaking. Make sure that you have things far away from the mic so that you don't get feedback sound. And also, every question you have or anything you want to say, please address it to the chair. So it's my pleasure to welcome the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission today. We have Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer Vicky Atreides, Rachel Fournette, General Counsel and Deputy Executive Director, Legal Services, and Scott Shortliff, Executive Director, Broadcasting, and they're here in person in the room. And we're going to welcome you and ask you to begin your presentation. I'm told you say you don't need 10 minutes, you'll do 8. So we'll give you the floor for 8 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having us. I would also like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I am joined today by our Head of Broadcasting, Scott Shortliff, and our General Counsel, Rachel Fournette. So let me just quickly touch on 3 things before we get into questions. First, how the CRTC is set up. Second, the context within which we operate. And finally, how we are prioritizing our work. So starting with how we're set up. As you know, the CRTC is an independent, quasi-judicial tribunal that operates at arm's length from government. We hold public hearings on telecommunications and broadcasting matters, and we make decisions based on the public record. The Commission has 9 members, a chair, a vice chair for telecommunications, a vice chair for broadcasting, and 6 full-time regional commissioners who are located across the country. And supporting the 9 decision makers is a team of expert staff like my colleagues who are here with me today. That brings me to the context within which we operate. As we know, Canada's communications sector touches every aspect of our daily lives. It's the pathway that connects us to each other, to our communities, and to the world around us. Since taking on my role earlier this year, I've had the privilege of meeting with and listening to a range of stakeholders from across the country, and I've heard about the importance of our communications sector. Let me share just a couple of examples. In Whitehorse, we heard many stories about the state of communications in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. We heard about one isolated community where students could not pivot to online learning because of a lack of connectivity. Their children lost 1, 2, and 3 years of education. Another example takes us 5,000 kilometers away from Whitehorse to Halifax. As you know, there were devastating wildfires in the area over the summer. We heard firsthand from community members about how they relied on local radio stations to give them the latest updates on the location of fires and also the need to evacuate. And we've heard countless other stories about the importance of our communication sector. We know that the CRTC has an important role in regulating the sector. So that brings me to our areas of focus. Earlier this year, we set out 3 priority areas for the CRTC. First, promoting competition to deliver reliable and high-quality internet and cell phone services to Canadians. Second, modernizing Canada's broadcasting system to promote Canadian and Indigenous content. And third, improving the CRTC to better serve Canadians. Let me briefly touch on each. En commençant par les télécommunications.
Promoting competition, we're taking continuous steps to improve the choice and affordability for Canadians while supporting investment in high-quality networks. A good example of how we are advancing is a good example of how we promote this work. In May, the CRTC established regulations that allow regional competitors to be present throughout the Canadian territory by using continuing.
And the 4th consultation looks at contributions that players need to make to support the broadcasting system. Today, and right after this appearance, we are on day 4 of a 3-week public hearing on this consultation. We have heard from approximately 20 interveners so far and look forward to hearing from over 100 more. During this hearing, we are exploring whether streaming services should make an initial contribution to the Canadian content system, and if so, where it should go. We are also asking whether this would help level the playing field with Canadian companies who are already required to support Canadian content. Through our hearing, we are building a robust and a diverse public record that will enable us to make decisions in the public interest. Comme vous le savez, le Parlement...
As you know, Parliament has also given us a new mandate to see the law on online news requires that we put in place a negotiating framework that is fair between the news enterprises in Canada and major online platforms. We have published our plan and we will soon have a public consultation process. Our 3rd area of action is focused behind the scenes, and that is improving the CRTC to better serve Canadians. What I have heard directly from people is that the CRTC needs to move quickly and transparently, given the impact our decisions have on consumers.
We have a question and answer segment. The first one is 6 minutes, and so what will happen is you will get questions and you will answer, and that is included in the 6 minutes. It's not just 6 minutes for questions. So please remember, everyone, to be as succinct as you possibly can so we could get as many questions in as we possibly can. So we begin with the Conservatives, Ms. Thomas, Rachel Thomas, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Missy Trudeau, thank you for being with us here today. We've been looking forward to having you at the table, and it's taken a little while to finally coordinate this, so we appreciate your time. During the debate, during Bill C-11, as you're aware, there was great conversation with regards to user-generated content and whether or not it was scoped in. The government tried to insist that it wasn't. What I note, however, is that in their directive to the CRTC, they've had to make that explicit. So they've made the distinction or they've distinguished for you that user-generated content is not to be regulated. Now, if that's already not in the legislation, why would that distinction need to be made in your directive?
Thank you for the question. I would say that we know that user-generated content is out. That is clear to us. I can't speak to why something was in a directive or not.
Okay, but if it's not in the legislation, why does that need to be a specific directive given to you?
We do have clarity at the CRTC that user-generated content is not within scope, but I couldn't speak to why it was spelled out in a directive.
Do you not feel that you could have interpreted the legislation without that directive?
I will turn things over to our head of broadcasting to speak a little bit further about that.
Having a directive from government is absolutely within the purview of the government. Because we're arm's length, we don't engage in a long dialogue with them about our understanding of the Act. We received the act. We interpreted it when we received it. The government has fulfilled its or used its power to give us greater clarity. Whether or not we already had realized some of those things or not is something the government wouldn't be aware of because we're arm's length. The government felt that there would be usefulness in giving us greater clarity about the act. We've received it, and certainly we will apply it in the spirit in which it was intended.
So I understand what you're saying here today, and of course, you're going to take that position. I find it very interesting, as do many Canadian creators, that the government tried to insist that user-generated content was not scoped in within the legislation, but then needed to give a directive to the CRTC with regard to that end. That actually suggests that it is, in fact, within the framework of the legislation, hence the need for the directive. Nevertheless, you also mentioned that you function at an arm's length. Your mandate letter says, quote, the independence of the CRTC along with the transparency of its processes will be of the highest importance. However, there is a page on the CRTC's website titled Myths and Misconceptions. And when I read it, it is verbatim the talking points from the minister's office, the talking points that he used over and over and over again in the House of Commons and right here at this committee table. So I'm curious as to who authorized the publishing of the Myths and Facts page.
So I can briefly speak to that and can turn things over to our head of broadcasting. We are an independent quasi-judicial tribunal.
I'm just curious who authorized the publication of that page.
So we are independent. The CRTC.
I understand. I'm just curious who authorized it.
The CRTC did draft those myths and facts in order to provide some clarity for Canadians in terms of what was going to happen with the implementation of the legislation. So that is something that was drafted by and approved by the CRTC.
Okay. Ms. Utrides, as the head of that organization, did you authorize it?
I did.
Okay, thank you. That was simple. I'm now curious because I have this OPQ in front of me, which is an access to information that members of Parliament, of course, can submit. And in it, one of the question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Shields, was what type of communication took place between the department and the CRTC? And one of the things that went from the department over to the CRTC was, quote, media lines and questions and answers. That doesn't speak of independence. Why would the Heritage Department send you media lines and questions and answers if you're functioning at an arm's length?
So I can tell you with full certainty that we absolutely are independent. I do know that our communications team sometimes does share some communications information, not for comment, but just for information.
Okay, but questions and answers. Could you not come up with those on your own if you're supposed to be functioning independent?
Again, I can't speak to exactly what was shared, but the communications teams do sometimes share some communications information for information.
Okay, so not exactly independent. One of the things that is said by the CRTC is that content and digital creators will not be regulated. Of course, on September 29th, out came a podcast registry. Now, I understand that you will try to lead this committee to believe that you are not actually regulating podcasters, but rather the platforms. But what's interesting is that podcasters rely on those platforms in order to get their podcasts out. And of course, by regulating the platforms, those that use them are in fact regulated. For example, if a bookstore is mandated that they can only sell red books, that doesn't impact the publishers. The publishers aren't being regulated. In fact, they are, because of course, if they publish a blue book, its sales are going nowhere. A green book, its sales are going nowhere. So in looking after the platform or mandating things to the platform, you are in fact mandating those that are producing content. Is that not true?
And I'll be very clear with this, we are not regulating individual podcasts. We are not regulating podcast content, and we are not regulating podcast creators.
Sure. I understand that you're not doing that directly, but you are doing it indirectly, and it's a distinction without a difference. We'll leave it there.
So if there's time to respond to that, perhaps I could explain what that decision did, which Okay, thank you. Which was ask that large platforms provide basic information like contact information with respect to their services, and that would include podcasts. And that is the extent of it. So I wouldn't say that it's that we are regulating in that
Why
space.
are you asking for registration?
I'm sorry, your time is up. Oh, no, sorry, you have a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't see the one there. Pardon?
Don't.
Pardon?
6 minutes.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, I think you've gone over time. I wasn't paying a lot of attention to the stopwatch. Thank you. And so now I go to for the Liberals, Ms. Hepner.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, guys, I'm on like a 14-minute jet lag, and I'm kind of a little bit whatever.
So you're going to give me those 10 seconds back, right?
Yes, I'll give you the 10 seconds back, Lisa, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Giddee. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Very close.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being here with us today. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond more fulsomely to the previous question. So, like, what does it mean that the CRTC is an independent quasi-judicial body?
So thank you for the question. So we operate as a quasi-judicial tribunal, which is like a court. So we are independent. All of our decisions are based on the public record. We hold public proceedings, and our decisions are made by basing them on the public interest and what is put before us.
And so if the CRTC came up with a really well phrased myths and facts page on new legislation, does it seem reasonable that a minister would use maybe those same lines that came from the CRTC?
So it would be hard for me to speculate as to whether that was used. I would say, and this comes down to our third priority, which I touched on, which is to better serve Canadians. Putting forward the myths and facts page was one way that we want it to be more transparent and give more certainty to Canadians.
Thank you. I'd like to go back now to what I was originally going to ask you, and that's about you taking on this role quite recently. You have a background in law, in teaching law with the Competition Bureau, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what those experiences bring to this role.
Thank you for that. So before taking on this role at the CRTC earlier this year, I spent over 23 years in the private and public sectors, mainly in the area of regulatory law. Obviously, I've had the chance to work in the area of telecommunications and digital technologies. At my 12 years at the Competition Bureau in senior roles. I actually started my career appearing before tribunals like the CRTC, so like the Copyright Board and the Competition Tribunal. And the various leadership positions that I've had over the past many years within the public service have set me up nicely to work at the CRTC among an incredible expert group of staff and expert commissioners.
Do you think Canadians understand the role of the CRTC? And if not, how would you explain it to them?
I do think that we can do better. When you mention the CRTC, what we often hear, and I'm sure that committee members hear this as well, is people pay too much for their cell phone bills, and those are the kinds of things that we hear about often. I do think there's opportunity to do better. I would come back to what our mandate is, and that is really to, it's regulating the broadcasting and telecommunications industries, but we've put forward areas of focus because the volume is huge. I think as everybody here knows, the volume is huge, and so we don't want a D grade on everything. We'd like to focus on the areas that have the most importance and the highest impact, and so that is really making sure that we have competition on the telecommunications side, so that's for internet and cell phone services, making sure that we reach out to Indigenous, rural and remote communities, making sure that broadband is rolling out there, and then on the broadcasting side, ensuring that we have a modern framework, which is what we are right in the middle of in terms of the hearing that's going on right now.
How important do you think it is that we have a modern framework for the Broadcasting Act?
It's critical. So, you know, we've, again, as I said, we're on day 4 today of a 3-week public hearing. We've heard from a wide variety of stakeholders over the past few days. You know, we've heard from traditional broadcasters who have said that they are shackled by regulation and they're having a very difficult time competing. We've heard from creators who say that, you know, they need more money in the system. We've heard from online services and global online services who say that they already make huge contributions. So we've heard from a lot of stakeholders so far. That will continue over the next 2.5 weeks. But certainly we've heard that there is a need to make some changes.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
How much power does the
That's cool. You've
CRTC
been
really
doing that
have
a lot.
to regulate internet
It's
giants
unnecessary,
that are
but,
based in
thank
other
you very
countries?
much.
So the Online Streaming Act gives us the mandate to do that. So we will take the mandate that has been given to us by Parliament and we will implement it.
Did you find, since your appointment, that your goals or your priorities changed at all? Did anything take you by surprise since you took on this role?
Okay, thank you. I would say what has taken me by surprise is just it's the volume of work. There's a lot, and you know, coming in, I saw that we had over 400 decisions, notices, and orders that go out every single year, and that's sort of our bread and butter, if I can put it that way. And then we have very big issues like how do we fix cell phone and internet competition and modernize the Broadcasting Act at the same time. So that's why we've focused on priority areas.
Would you say you need more people or more resources in order to more adequately fulfill your mandate?
I think the answer to that is always yes, but what I would say is that we are well prepared to do the work that we need to do right now, and to the extent that we need more resources, I will ask for
Thank
them.
you very much. And now I go to the Bloc Québécois, Martin Champeau, for 6 minutes, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank all three of you for being here. It was a long-awaited meeting. It was a pleasure meeting you. I hear you answering these questions. We have a lot of concerns with everything that has to do with the review of the act that we're working on. And you said earlier in your opening speech that you received 600 briefs, demands, applications from different groups across Canada. And you have heard 20 so far. To me, that's somewhat troubling. It seems that the task is really heavy. Do you think you will be able to deliver on that mandate in the time frames that will allow us to promote culture, the broadcasting area, our producers, or is this task too heavy with the resources you have right now? Thanks so much for the question. Absolutely, we feel ready. I would say we have an expert team that will be assisting us. We also have members from the CRTC that are experts on the panel with me. And our decisions will be based on the briefs we receive. The minister recently stated that she hoped that we should be able to have a new regulatory framework by 2025 for us. In the culture sector, for broadcasters, 2025 is an eternity. All kinds of things can happen until then on a policy perspective. And this area that is so delicate, do you think you have the means to act with urgently? I think the machinery is heavy and it's not really well equipped to face the needs. Well, I will start and then I'll ask my colleague to add a few words. Yes, we fully understand the urgency. That's clear. That's why we started these consultations very quickly. We have a kind of a staggered approach. That's why we did that. And when you talk about 2025, when I say it's too far, 2025 does allow you some elbow room. It could be 13 months, but you could also see it as over 2 years. So do you think we can implement this early in 2025, talking about the regulatory framework, or am I being too optimistic about that? Thanks for your question. I will start and I'll ask my colleague to add some ideas. We've already started making decisions. There are 2 decisions that have already been rendered, and we'll carry on that way. So there are some interim stages also involved. Yesterday, the CEO of TOBACO, we know what happened with the cuts in TV, TVA. This is quite difficult for the television sector in Quebec, the largest private broadcaster in Quebec that has to cut 547 positions. It's a nightmare. Mr. Pelado says that our activities are being destroyed by regulation, and TVA has been really pushed to the wall. So they have done all the trimming that they could just to continue to staying on air. And this means that after that, they don't really have any other possibilities. Do you think that there is a future for television in the current model? How did you interpret Mr. Pelado's statements? And the Vice President of Bell had similar complaints about very restrictive regulations. Yes, this situation is quite troubling for us. We heard what Quebeco had to say. We started with Quebeco last Monday morning, so it's a troubling situation for us. But that, again, that's why we are acting quickly to determine right now whether we should put it in place. Some contributions right now. When you talk about contributions, are you talking about additional tariffs, or can you explain what form that would take? Yes. As the chair said, we're currently looking at some of the initial tariffs that some of the digital platforms can do to strengthen the broadcasting system in Canada. Since we're in a hearing format, we cannot really provide too many details. We have a panel that's looking into these matters. These issues are very important for the CRTC. That's why we started with that particular hearing on a priority basis. I think it's a very good idea. I agree with you. Yes, you have 15 seconds. Thank you. Taking into account the reactions of these digital companies faced with all the regulations before them, don't you think it's somewhat a pious wish?
Merci beaucoup. J'y reviendrai.
I'm going to go to the New Democratic Party, and that would be Peter Julian. Peter, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses. We'll do a follow-up on Mr. Shampoo's question. Yes, indeed, when you're talking about contributions, or what scale are we talking about? A $500,000 contribution is not the same as $300 million. So what would be the capacities, the tools to strengthen that kind of regime? These are the issues specifically that the CRTC is looking at. What's the nature of these tariffs? So what's the nature? These are the things that the CRTC is looking into right now. I can say some international groups appeared during the hearing. I'm thinking specifically of Google, and the Commission, the act we are implementing now does provide us with tools to come up with regulations that would oblige some of the major players to contribute on a higher basis. So they are discussing with us, and we have a good view of that. Thank you. I think Google is receiving over $1 billion a year in indirect grants because Canadians are subsidizing them. All businesses that want to do advertisement on Google, that's $1 billion a year. And these major technology corporations can make increased contributions. It's important.
Are gouged mercilessly by cell phone, the big telecom. And we have a market monopoly of over 90%. Canadians pay among the highest prices in the world, often, as you cited in your introductory remarks, so often without the service that goes with it. So internet and cell phone fees in the midst of the affordability crisis that so many Canadian families are facing are a critical aspect of reducing the gouging that is going on when people go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas pumps, when they try to use their cell phone or have internet access. I note that one of the criticisms of the CRTC regime is the following. CRTC regime places all of its bets on existing regionally bound competitors who have already demonstrably failed to provide sufficient price discipline and service innovation despite years of effort. As the Commission itself notes, the dominant providers exercise market power at a national level, allowing them to weather a substantial amount of competitive pressure in any particular region. How do you respond to those criticisms that what the CRTC is putting in place simply will not address the affordability crisis that comes from the massive gouging by big telecom?
So this is something that we have heard from many Canadians about how unhappy they are with respect to their bills and service. So we can use the levers that we have. And what we've done on the cell phone side is to allow regional providers to access the networks of the large companies. For a period of time, they need to do that within 7 years and build out their own networks. But that has already shown a more choice in the market, and we've seen that recently. And as I said in my opening remarks, just over the past year, you can see plans now, both from regional carriers and also from the national providers, that are better for Canadians than they were previously. We are also taking all kinds of other steps in terms of, through our broadband fund, making sure that we reach out to rural, remote, and Indigenous communities so that they have more choice there as well.
To address the takeover of Shaw by Rogers. It was rubber stamped by the Liberal government, tragically. I was on the picket line just last weekend with Shaw workers, longtime workers, who were basically locked out by Rogers, and they're using massively replacement workers. Now, the NDP is pressed for anti-scab legislation. That'll be before the House. Is before the House now, and we are expecting that will be adopted. But to what extent does the CRTC see with a bad eye that this type of actions by big telecom, where they run roughshod over their workers and simply lock them out and bring in replacement workers rather than negotiating in good faith a collective agreement?
So I would just come back to the CRTC's role and our mandate as an independent quasi-judicial tribunal. Our focus is on regulating telecommunications, promoting competition.
Thank you. The issue of resources has come up repeatedly. Ms. Hepner raised it, Mr. Champoux as well. You have a huge mandate, an important mandate, given what is happening right now in our broadcasting sector, what's happening with cell phone and internet gouging, what's happening with the foreign interference, for example. To what extent do you need additional resources? Because there are delays that have, and complaints about the delays in CRTC's decisions, and often there has not been the tools in place for the CRTC to follow up and ensure that the companies comply.
I'm sorry, Mr. Julian, we're going to have to ask that for that answer in the next round. Thank you. So now we go to the second round, which is a 5-minute round, not 6-minute round. And we begin with, for the Conservatives, Kevin Waugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, everybody. I've been around here for a few years. C-18 originally was supposed to help the newspapers in this country. It's done anything but, as you know, the big telcos got their hands into it, including the public broadcaster, who wants another additional $172 million. It's interesting because Ms. Tate was in that chair a few weeks ago. They get $1.4 billion from the public. They get $400 million in advertising, and yet they want their hands into C-18. So when the bill originally came, it was for the newspapers. And as I said, in the last year, I have gobs of newspapers that have gone under. You know, Metroland, 650 jobs lost. I can talk about Pincher Creek, Vermilion. I have some in my province. And so when I look at your mandate letter, Ms. Treaties, it says Online News Act seeks to enhance fairness in the Canadian digital news marketplace. Fairness. It's intended to benefit diversity of news business, including local and independent outlets. How can that be? The newspapers are absolutely pushed out in this conversation. Just your thoughts on the newspapers being pushed out when originally C-18 was all about the local newspapers.
So we are concerned about news and the state of news, as I know this committee is and Canadians are. You know, I would say with respect to newspapers specifically, the CRTC does not have a role or mandate in regulating newspapers or diversity of voices. What we have is a limited mandate under the Online News Act, under C-18, to put in place this bargaining framework.
I thought you did have a role in diversity of news business. That's your mandate. You just told me you don't.
Not for newspapers, and we can elaborate on that if you'd like.
Well, that's a gap in the system then. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously and clearly have a role in in news and broadcasting, which we take very seriously. But it's important to note the difference between C-11 and C-18. C-11 gives us a large policy questions. There's a number of policy objectives. We have to figure out how to achieve them. With C-18, we're basically being asked to administer a policy that the government is setting in regulation and which will be in regulation by the end of the year. But our role is really to facilitate the commercial negotiations that are based on what we've been given. So for better or for worse, we're not being asked to regulate in the newspaper environment. Newspaper policy is something that very much sits with the Department of Canadian Heritage. Having said that, once we have that mandate, we will take very seriously our role to help facilitate those commercial arrangements.
So in your mandate, you're instructed to make a free and independent press your priority. That's what it says. So how can you concede this government continues to spend millions on media? Tuesday, they just threw another $100 million at journalism. To me, there's a line. This government continues to throw money at journalism, and yet you are an independent press. Your priority is, there is a crossover here. When the government starts throwing money at journalism, there is an issue with journalism as we go forward on that. And you know, your role as independent now, when you see millions of dollars being spent on journalists, there is a line of integrity that I think has been crossed.
So I would come back to the CRTC's role. What I would say is that under C-11 and under the hearings that we're holding right now, we are looking at whether certain money, if we do go the base contribution route for online streaming services, should some of that money go to news funds?
Okay, so finally, I only have 45 seconds. June 14th, C-18 passed. That was the day Bell laid off 1,300 employees, 6% of their workforce. Then they shut down 6 radio stations. Then on that same day C-18 passed, they turn to you and say, we want to do less local news. What was your response to Bell officials that day?
20 seconds?
That request that came in the form of an application is still with commission staff.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kevin. And we go to the Liberals. Anna Gainey for 5 minutes, Anna.
Merci. Et merci de votre présence.
Thank you for being here today with us. These are very interesting presentations. I will begin with by saying that I share some of the concerns relating to TVA with my colleague and the situation over there. Obviously, the changes in telecommunications are taking place on a faster and faster rhythm, and we hear these examples of loss of jobs. Was the CRTC flexible enough to meet up with the speed of these changes and the impact on the Canadian industry? Thanks for the question. Yes, I think we have been quite adaptable. Yes, we are a tribunal. Basically, we have some very formal proceedings. We have hearings. We listen to witnesses from stakeholder groups. That's a significant aspect of our job in order to make decisions. As we said, we've heard of examples of major changes. There was a recent case where there was a very urgent situation, and the Commission decided to prioritize that issue to render a decision very quickly. Yes, absolutely. We're flexible.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'm picking up the time from Ms. Gainey. That's okay. Yes, go ahead. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, it's always interesting to hear my Conservative colleagues speak about what appears to be disdain for the media, given that they in 2014 spent $20 million monitoring it, and they talk about wanting to defund the CBC in their caucus, but I find it remarkable that their members, they're even out of touch with their members, because their members voted down a motion to defund the CBC. So I want to put that on the record as we start, because I think it's important that sometimes what you may hear from Conservative members may not reflect, Conservative MPs may not actually reflect the will of Canadians, so, or the facts. So let's talk about the facts. Your myths and facts page, that seems to be the topic of a lot of conversation. Did you draft it, or did the Minister's office draft it?
The CRTC drafted it.
And did you share it with them for their feedback, or did you share it with them for information, or did you share it with them as you would to anybody else?
We don't share documents with anybody for feedback. Those are CRTC only documents.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk of how you were purported to want to regulate podcasts. Are you in the business of regulating podcasts?
No.
Are you collecting information on podcasts?
We're not collecting information on podcasts, but perhaps we could just clarify what that
please.
decision did.
Yeah, so what we've asked for that decision is to collect basic information on podcast services, which is literally your legal name, your address, how we can get in contact with you. I mean, it's that is all we're asking for, and that gives us the ability
just to clarify,
collect information down the line if we need it.
So just to clarify, you're looking for information that would tell somebody where a podcast.
Not even that.
Not even that. Okay.
Not even that.
Great.
We're asking podcast services, and you can imagine there's a few who have revenues of over $10 million a year, and we're not even sure if there are big podcast services who have over $10 million a year in Canada, to register with us, to just let us know. We are a service that provides that. We're not asking them to even enumerate what their podcasts are or who their podcasters are.
So let's say Peter and Mr. Julian and I decide we're going to start a podcast, and we're going to have the 10 people that probably care about what we think. Yeah. What would we have to do in terms of the CRTC?
Absolutely nothing.
So we would not have to register with you?
No.
We would not have to tell you where we're running our podcast out of?
No.
We would not have to give you the address from where we are broadcasting or the nature of our content?
No.
So we could sit anywhere, make our own podcast, and say and do what we like, and you're not going to regulate us.
That is absolutely correct.
So for avoidance of doubt, the average person or the average creator of a podcast should not have to worry about any kind of oversight from the CRTC.
That is correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now we started 5 minutes late, so I'm going to give extra time here. So I want Mr. Shampoo for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Moi, ça m'inquiète un peu le projet.
The podcast project from my colleague Mr. Talabi somewhat troubles me. To the
leader's office, the official opposition, which. Okay, I want to come back.
Concern regulating the digital. That's what you're saying. Absolutely. Thank you. I don't think I have any more time.
Around.
Thank you.
I just personally didn't want to watch.
I want to come back to the issue of
Quebec
resources for the
get fed up
CRTC.
with the
Yesterday in the House
translation.
of Commons, Leader of the Official Opposition announced a terrorist attack, which turned out to be absolutely false. Now, this came because somebody in their leader's office, the official opposition, obviously was watching the Fox propaganda network, which was also giving that false news. Now, I understand that the Fox propaganda network hearings are being delayed, and any decision on Fox propaganda, which provides a tidal wave of toxic disinformation in Canada. There's no fact-based journalism there, and they're very open about that. The Fox propaganda network hearings and decision is delayed, and I note and come back to the fact that there have been complaints about delays with the CRTC. So you have a very important mandate. Broadcasting is in crisis in many respects. People are being gouged with cell phone and internet fees. We're seeing foreign interference from Fox propaganda network and other sources. Do you have the resources to do the job? And I don't share your confidence that you do, given the complaints about delays and given the fact that the CRTC's role is so vitally important. So what do you need? What can this committee suggest to the government that you need in terms of additional resources?
Okay, so thank you for the question. As I've said, we have the resources that we need right now. We will not be shy to ask for additional resources if and when we need them. With respect to the complaint that you're referring to that we had received, we did post that as per our normal process. We posted the complaint. We received over 7,000 submissions in response to that complaint. And, people had very different perspectives on the complaint. But what became very clear is that there was concern about issues around, content and freedom of expression. So what we did was we took
17 seconds.
We took that record and we decided that we are going to hold a broader hearing. So that is forthcoming on how we treat foreign services who are operating in Canada.
Thank you. And I'm going to go now to Mr. Shields for the Conservatives. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And quickly, you described as being independent, arm's length. I've been on C10, C11, C18, so we've heard ministers say that a number of times. So I've got the ATIP question, and you said that you did not send information to the minister. You said that a few minutes ago. So be careful, because I have information here. So they sent it to you then, because I know what they sent. I know went back and forth. So when it talks about media lines, I know what those are. So they sent them to you then. You didn't send them to them, you said. So they sent them to you.
Again, there is some exchange of communications materials.
You said you didn't send them to them. Then they sent them to you, media lines, right?
I don't know what
I do.
media lines.
I do. I've got it here, and I've got the information, so I know. So be careful.
But again, if information is shared for information, then that happens through communications, and it's not for comment.
So they sent it to you. You said you didn't send it to them. So they then sent those media lines to you. Thank you.
I don't
Moving
know if
on.
any media lines
I've got
were
other
sent.
questions to ask.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
I can move on. I can move to my next question.
You can move on, but you asked a
Thank
question.
you.
We should hear the answer.
She said she
asked to be able to answer the question.
She gave me the answer. You also. Thank you. So, Scott, you said.
Point of order, Madam
needed.
Chair. The witness was asked a question and was not afforded the opportunity to respond.
I did make that point, and
Thank
I
you.
think the witness should be able to respond. The chair decides who responds and who speaks. Go ahead.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. If you seek clarity from the clerk, I believe that you will find that the members of this committee have the ability to make a statement should they wish to, or ask a question. If my colleague chose to make a statement, that is his prerogative.
Well, it sounded like a question, but there you go. If it's a statement, is it a statement, Mr. Shields?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move ahead.
Thank you. Sue.
No, I think
I have the floor.
He made a statement. He has the floor. We continue. Someone else. There's another opportunity. Someone can
Point of order, Madam
clarify
Chair.
that.
It wasn't a statement. It was an accusation, and the witnesses should be allowed to respond
Sorry,
if they,
Kevin, point of order,
choose
please.
to. If they choose not to respond, that's their prerogative, but they should be given the opportunity to respond.
That's just not true.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on. You made the statement, if needed. Now, there's a phrase out there that says, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you. That's an oxymoron in my writing. Very scary. So if you ask, if needed, right, you stated, you're collecting that information if needed, right?
Yes, I did say that, yeah.
What does if needed mean?
If needed in this case means we have a broad mandate to look at the broadcasting system in Canada. We're at the front end of this. The question was raised, does podcasting impact the broadcasting system in Canada? We have no specific questions about it right now. We've preserved the ability to contact large companies that distribute podcasts in the future if needed. I don't see this as particularly controversial to say that there are elements of the broadcasting system we need to be in touch with if we develop policies. We have no policies regarding podcasts on the table at the moment.
But you're saying that if needed.
Yes, absolutely. We're a quasi-judicial tribunal, and I can't speak to a theoretical for the future.
But you're setting it up for that as a registration, basically, because you're saying, if needed, we will need your contact information.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. One of the things you said is that you're collecting information on what is Canadian attitudes, opinions, ideas, and values, right? You're collecting information, and the documentation says that's what you're collecting information about.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
When you're out there engaging, you're looking for Canadian values, what are Canadians in podcasting?
My apologies. I'm not sure which document you are referring to. If you're referring to the registration consultation as a whole, we could address that, but I apologize. I'm not aware of the context of your question.
Okay, I'll move to the next one. You're talking about connectivity and the word the last community. Is that a phrase I've heard today, getting to the last community?
That's not a phrase that I use.
But I heard that used from one of you saying getting the internet connected to the last community.
To remote, rural, and Indigenous communities?
It's the last community. To the last farm gate is where it needs to be. I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague.
There's 25 seconds from Mrs. Thomas. 20 now.
I just need a mic. Thank you, Chair. At this point in time, I'll be moving a motion. And of course, those around this committee table understand that there is only so much time where we are in public and where we have the opportunity to move a motion that we feel is of great importance. As other parties have done, I will take this opportunity. I recognize that we have a witness here, and so I'm happy to move the motion, make a statement, and then we can move to a vote quickly if we wish. The motion is as follows.
Order, Madam Chair. Last time the CRTC was here, we had a filibuster from the Conservatives that blocked the CRTC for testifying for over an hour.
This isn't a point of order.
And this time, we have another hour
point of order.
where the CRTC
I
is
must
available.
listen to what the member is saying before I can rule on whether it's a point of order or not. I'm not, pardon?
Are you yelling at me?
No, I'm just trying to speak over you because you continue to speak. Mr. Julian has the floor. He has a point of order.
As do I.
Mr. Julian, go ahead.
Last time, I note that the last time the CRTC appeared, the Conservatives blocked for over an hour their ability to testify, cutting short our time to ask questions. It appears the Conservatives are doing the same thing this time. What they want to do is curtail the witnesses and the important questions. I still have many questions to ask the CRTC. I'm very glad they're here. But that's 2 consecutive appearances now where the Conservatives are trying to block the CRTC from responding to our questions. And I believe that that's inappropriate. And again, the Conservatives blocking the CRTC from answering these questions, not in the public interest. So.
Yes, Ms.
Chair, I've tried to remain quiet while Mr. Julian continues to impugn the motives of the Conservative members of this committee. I think Mrs. Thomas was clear that she understands we have witnesses. We only have them for an hour, as far as I know, and that we're at the end of that time, and she's going to quickly move a motion, which I think is not going to take very much time. So it's not a filibuster, and I wish Mr. Julian would quit
I would like to point out, however, that we have not finished the questions. There's one other question to be left to be asked by the Liberal member. And so I think that is cutting short the questions we're asking the CRTC. So I think Mr. Julian has a point of order. You have responded to it. But I do think it would be nice to have the last question asked.
Madam Chair, I understand that the motion that we were considering at the last meeting will not be moved because we have some resolution around the appearance of the Minister of Sport. So I would ask you to ask our witnesses if they're prepared to stay for another hour, because that would give us more opportunity to fully ask the questions that we have to ask of the CRTC.
That would be out of order because the agenda says that there is only 1 hour. I have stretched the hour because I did want to have everyone have a chance to ask a question of the CRTC. And what we've done is we've suggested that one of the questioners shouldn't ask a question by Ms. Thomas moving. She could wait until the questioner asked a question and then go ahead and move the motion. She has the time to do it if she wishes. And so I would like to see a bit of respect and fairness on this committee so that we don't treat some members of this committee as if they have no authority, no options, and no ability to be involved in the game. Mr. Cotto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I move a motion to move into camera?
No, because there's already a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor already.
Madame la Présidente, un rappel au règlement pour moi aussi.
I am asking Ms. Thomas if she would allow
Un rappel au règlement.
a point of respect. Sorry.
A point of order. Mr. Shampoo. Thank you. I think there was an interesting issue relating to courtesy raised by Mr. Julian to see if our guests can stay a little longer, because in any case, we are going to get caught up in a lengthy debate on the motion. So if our guests can stay, we hope to move quickly. But if they cannot stay an additional hour, I think it would be right to thank them and they can leave us. So even if I don't really agree with the idea that we prevent our Liberal colleagues from asking their questions, if we are strictly to follow the rules, Madam Chair, our colleague, Ms. Thomas, is right to raise the motion right now.
And I have acknowledged that, but I'm asking her to just allow, if she could, out of respect, to have one more question asked of another member of this committee.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Both myself and Mr. Shampoo have asked that if you could ask the witnesses if they're prepared to stay longer.
Well, to ask them that, I would need to have consent from the whole committee that they want to do that. We do have a motion on the floor that we have to deal with. And so all I'm trying to do is get us back on order and say, can Ms. Thomas, before she moves her motion, or can she postpone it while Mr. Nur Mohammed asks his question? Because the Liberals have now been cut short of one question in this round. And that's all I'm asking. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that this committee is familiar with the rules, and of course I can only move a motion when I have the floor. I only have the floor when it's my opportunity to ask a question. So as much as your chastising is taken to heart, Ms. Chair, with respect, it's wrong to imply that I have the opportunity at the end of the question rounds. I do not. The rules of this committee state that I only have the opportunity to move a motion when I have the floor.
I acknowledge that, Ms. Thomas.
I have the floor right now, and I wish to move a motion.
So, and I would like to finish what I'm saying. I'm asking you to just make a say, let Mr. Mohammed come. My motion is still on the floor, and I will turn to you because the motion will be on the floor. That's all I'm asking. But there you go. You don't want to see that, so we will deal with Ms. Thomas's motion. Yes, Mr. Trudeau.
Then suggest, considering we had the witnesses for 1 hour and it's now 50 minutes past the scheduled time, that we just we finish with the witnesses,
Yes.
and we'll forget about our question then, if that's
Yes,
the case.
I will do that. I was about to do that because Ms. Thomas has got the ability to move a motion, and it's on the floor now. So I want to thank the witnesses for coming and answering questions. So I'm sorry that we kept you a little longer than you should have been, and I know you may have other things to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And so we will continue. Mr. Newman,
Point of order. Madam Chair, it is disappointing that the Conservatives have chosen to cast aspersions and then deny the Liberals and the Democrats and the Bloc the opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses and to take that time up.
Madam Chair.
And it yet again reflects that there is no real interest in doing the committee's work of the committee.
Point of order being, I need to listen to it to know if it's a point of order or not, Mrs. Thomas. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thomas. I need to listen to know whether I can rule if it's a point of order or not. I'm trying to listen. Sorry, Mr. New Mohammed, go ahead.
And so just for future, Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we can ensure that when we are doing the rounds of questions, that we can ensure that there's enough time to complete the rounds so that everybody would have that opportunity. I mean, looking at the clock, it would have seemed that even if we had finished with Ms. Thomas's, there may have been 1 minute left, even if we had delayed for 5 minutes for us and no time for Mr. Champour or Mr. Julien.
Mohammed, I think we have already dismissed the witnesses, thanked them, and now we're dealing with Mrs. Thomas's motion, which she's absolutely correct that she had the opportunity only when she was having the floor. She did have the floor. She moved a motion. We have to deal with it. Sorry, Kevin.
A point of clarification. The Bloc and the NDP were done their questioning.
They have already spoken.
They were done their questioning. They were done 2.5 minutes. We had a point of motion here, and this is the procedure. But the Bloc, Mr. Noor Mohammed said the Bloc and the NDP had another round of questioning. They didn't.
Well, so I stand corrected, Mr. Waugh. I stand corrected. So it was really only us.
This is
so
not a debate. I'm sorry. This is not a debate.
So you scored your point. That's great.
Point of order. Mr. New Mohammed is absolutely.
Point of order.
Sorry,
Point
Mr.
of order.
Mr.
Point of order.
Mr. Waugh is correct.
Point of order.
Sorry.
Point of order. Madam Chair, as I indicated and Mr. Champour indicated, the CRTC was prepared to stay longer, given how at the last time they appeared, the Conservatives blocked their full committee hearing. I was hoping for the courtesy of allowing further questions to the CRTC. They were prepared to stay, and we had far more questions. So Mr. Noor Mohammed is absolutely right. The NDP and I believe Mr. Champour had a lot more questions to ask of the CRTC in the public interest.
Well, the decision has been made. Ms. Thomas had a motion on the floor. She had the floor and could make the motion, and we now have to move forward. Mr. Thomas, your motion.
Thank you, Chair. The motion that I wish to move is as follows. Given that the Department of Canadian Heritage, under the leadership of the Honourable Pablo Rodriguez, approved anti-racism grants upwards of $130,000 to Laith Marouf of the Community Media Advocacy Centre, CMAC, on October 21st, 2022, the Honourable Pablo Rodriguez appeared before the Heritage Committee, during which time he was asked by a number of members of Parliament about the date he was made aware of Laith Marouf's derogatory remarks about Jews and Francophones, and the Minister reported to the committee that he was not informed until after August 22nd, 2022. And given that an article by the Globe and Mail and an access to information request indicate emails circulated from the former Diversity and Inclusion Minister, the Honourable Ahmed Hussein, his former Chief of Staff, Minister Rodriguez's former Chief of Staff, and the Deputy Minister of Canadian Heritage between August 17th and August 19th, 2022, including one sent to Minister Rodriguez's personal email account titled Laith Marouf and Anti-Semitic Hate Speech. The committee invite the former Minister for Canadian Heritage, the Honourable Pablo Rodriguez, to appear before the committee as soon as possible for no fewer than 2 hours to clarify his remarks concerning Laith Marouf, and that the committee report its findings to the House. To the committee through you, Chair. The reason why this motion is important is because the members here will recall the former Minister of Heritage, Mr. Pablo Rodriguez, was brought before this committee and asked questions with regards to Laith Marouf's hiring and as to when the minister was made aware of Laith Marouf's anti-Semitic behavior and conduct on social media platforms. And the minister told this committee that he did not find out until it was announced in the media. But we have an ATIP that actually shows that the minister was made aware through an email to his P9 account. And that email was sent between August 17th and August 19th, before things broke in the media. And that email was titled Laith Marouf and Anti-Semitic Hate Speech. That's pretty clear. That's a pretty clear indication to the minister that there's a problem. And so the minister either misled this committee or didn't do his job with great competency. I'd like to give him the opportunity to clarify which one is it. And so in order to give him that opportunity to clarify, he would need to come to this committee and give us the opportunity to ask questions. Hence, the motion that I have put on the table today, which asks for him to come for no fewer than 2 hours, so that we would be able to finally, hopefully, I guess, get to the bottom of this and understand what took place here. I mean, after all, $130,000 were given by the Heritage Department to a raging anti-Semite and someone who also rages against Francophones, and in that $130,000 was given to him to run anti-racism training. It's insane. It is the definition of insanity. And so it is incumbent upon the minister to come to this committee and to answer questions that we have with regard to what happened. And further to that, to answer questions with regard to when he knew about Laith Marouf and his horrible conduct, incredibly vile remarks. And further to that, this is an individual who continues to make these remarks. And this is an individual who is supposed to pay back the $130,000 now that it's been brought to the government's attention by the official opposition. However, more than 9 months have passed since that was demanded of him, and not a single dime has been paid back. That's a problem. And so I'm curious as to how the minister, the former minister, would justify what has happened here. And the only way that that can be, settled is for the minister to have the opportunity to come here and to clarify former remarks that he made that now seem to be falsehoods, and to clarify as to why this decision was made with 130,000 Canadian taxpayer dollars. That's my motion. Consider it moved.
Mr. Martin Champoux.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank
All right, gang, we're going to wrap it up just about right there. I've got a few videos it's sort of the intro to today's show and the whole thing. It's about 15 minutes. You can watch it. But the show we're pretty much wrapping up right there. What a gong show watching Giddee fry is. Like, Come on, lady, retire. Do yourself a little self-respect and get out of the spotlight. Like, Rachel Thomas is a stud. That's fun. She's out on maternity leave. She's having her first baby. Anyhow, guys, we're going to wrap this up right here. We're going out on this. Thank you all so much. There's new subscribers, new members, new people showing up, new people in the chat room. I love the people in the chat room. You guys are amazing. I don't know how hard you're making the moderators work, but everybody seems to just have the perfect level of sensibility, which is what I want. Again, it's been a pleasure. We're going to wrap this up. It's been a fun week back, pretty exciting. Anyhow, we're going to go out on this, and we're going to start off with...
Days are wide awake, visions are for crazy men. Not me, for goodness sake, but I'm seeing things. I'm seeing things. I'm seeing things, believe me, I've never seen before. My little things deceive me, like when you threw me out the door. I couldn't believe my eyes.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The West Network.
Thank you all for tuning in. It's a blast hanging out with you guys.
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
Captain Kirk, beam me aboard.
Quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
And now for this news flash. The worst blizzard in 50 years is approaching us at a great rate. The Weather Service reports that barometers are falling sharply. Oh no! Ah!
Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. This is MacDonald Carey, and these are the days of our lives.
Some people look at a flag swaying in the breeze at the White House and they say, that's America. Me, whenever I see an American flag hung in the window of a basement apartment by guys who have better things to do with their money than buy curtains, I say, that's America to me. In America, there are 51 states, or maybe it's 80 by now. Does England count? I'm not quite sure. The one thing I am sure of, though, is if I'm standing in a warehouse beside a time clock and a guy is punching in for his best friend who is too hungover to get out of bed, I'm standing in America, the makeover capital of the world, the place where every young man has to answer in his heart the question, what do you love more, your girlfriend or your car? And where that young man can buy a beat-up car for $300 and has to spend $1,000 to insure it. Where else can even a paperboy option the film rights to a book? A woman on an assembly line works out her overtime in her head to infinity. And at the exact same moment, her husband gets into a car accident because he's looking at a girl in a tube top. In America, where spelling doesn't count, people's pets do. Where else can a guy get a job riding a whale at Marineland? But in America. In America, a guy's girlfriend breaks up with him over the phone. So he gets a gun and kills the principal. Everyone is sad until they get the day off. Next week, another guy, another gal, another we can still be friends phone call. Uh-oh, the assistant principal gets it. And everyone's sad because they don't get the day off. Because he's just the assistant principal. America, a land of opportunity. Yes, that great lumbering beast that journeys tirelessly, stops only to eat a clubhouse sandwich, pick its teeth with a matchbook cover, and fall asleep with the TV on. Again, America, a place for Americans.
You should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper bumper, stomper boo, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Bing bong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Ding dong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Tip tap, pitter pat, granny cat too. Rooty toot, kimble, loopy loo. Bobbity stompity, romper room and friends.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
WTF. Here, here.